Welcome to the School of Mythosynthesis. Katie and Peter here, and we are honored to guide you on a journey of awakening, alignment, and becoming. Every week, we bring you tools, teachings, and transmissions designed to enable you to embody your true essence and live from the inside out with clarity, sovereignty, and purpose and passion. So this week, we are going to talk about the sage, and this is the archetype of truth and wisdom. And so, Peter, can you give us a little bit more enlightenment about the truth and wisdom and what does that mean for the sage?
Excellent. Thanks, Kate. It's always nice chatting with you about archetypes and archetypal awakening and the work we're doing together. When we think about the sage, we think about, people might use the name the wise old man or the wise old woman. And the sage essentially is the seeker of truth. And, we're studying Carol Pearson, and one of the things that she's big on defining the sage as, that it's part of us that stands beyond our thoughts, our feelings, our desires, and merely just watches. The sage is that inner weakness that always draws us towards the truth. So in every circumstance, we're trying to find out, for some people, it may be to find out the truth of reality, the truth of government, the truth about education, or the truth about family. But the sage is that aspect of us that is seeking the truth. Some people, for example, that might be born in homes where, their parents had some falling out and they want to find out the truth about what happened. They go, searching to find that truth. And that is the energy or the impulse of the sage within our psyche.
And so, when we talk about like the ultimate truth and like truth, what we say is it can be very relative and it can be subjective. And so, when we look at the truth of the truth and awareness, do you want to kind of talk about just that deeper conversation about awareness?
For sure. Let's jump into the depth and the meat of it. Um, The ultimate truth, if a person asks what is the ultimate truth, of course, everything is one. There isn't any separation. And within that, everything being one, eyes within eyes, each individual eye, which we are, is an awareness. So the ultimate truth, individual truth, because there's a collective truth that everything is one, the ultimate individual truth is that each one of us is a piece of consciousness. And the only way consciousness can know that it's conscious is awareness. You are a conscious being has to be aware that it is conscious. That's the way it recognizes that I am. And the ultimate definition or realization of consciousness is being aware of that actual awareness, being aware of the fact that I am actually aware. That is full consciousness. Because you could have an awareness of a specific thing, you could have an awareness of a body, you could have an awareness of a thought, but having the awareness that I am aware is actually the true nature of consciousness.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And so then when it comes to like, I like that we often talk about this, we're not our thoughts, we're not our feelings, we're not this body. And so, so kind of what I hear that you're saying is that awareness is that separation from what we maybe think that we are to who we truly are. Is that?
Absolutely. The labels that we've placed on ourselves through countless, experiences from childhood, defining ourselves as certain things or, certain aspects, boy, girl, human, or intellectual, or, some people might say, brave. We've put on different labels on ourselves. However, so to speak, the error in consciousness is identifying ourselves with the label, with the thing, or with the thought, as opposed to standing separate apart from it. And awakening is really that separation or that observation of the fact that it is a thought that is arising in consciousness, and consciousness doesn't have to be fused with it. In order to transform it, consciousness has to be separated from it and be the observer, the awareness of it. And that is the ultimate truth, really, in awakening, is that everything that we have projected out of consciousness, we unfortunately or unconsciously attributed our essence or identified ourselves with a projection. And so we become stuck in that identity or become stuck in that identification. And of course, when we've identified ourselves as a specific thing, because there's always change in environment and change in society, when changes come to our reality, that identification does not fit the current environment. And so a person might feel like a victim. If a person, for example, identifies themselves as, I am a child of this person, or, a boy or a girl, or, I'm an intellectual, and you're in a situation where you do not need to be intellectual, you need to be more loving, that identification of being intellectual shows up. And because a person is fused with that identification, they might not be able to act differently in the situation or scenario where they need to be exhibiting a different characteristic or propensity. So awareness or awakening essentially is when there is a separation between the identification with thought, with what arises within our psyche, and our true self. Therefore, we can choose in any moment what role or what characteristic to exhibit that is suited for that specific situation.
Beautiful. And so, what I hear you saying is kind of that learned helplessness. Like if I learn to take something a certain way, then, or to see myself like maybe a starving artist, I do tie-dyes, right? So if I see myself as that starving artist, that's going to be the reality that I create. But with the sage archetype, I can create that separation, that awareness, and then maybe step into the magician archetype rather than the victim. And with the magician archetype, I can start to shift my reality by seeing things differently and then claiming things out loud differently. And then it starts to show up. So the sage really helps us to be able to see that new reality. And so we'll stick with the sage here, but it's really cool, like you talked about the orphan archetype, and so it's cool to see how they're all so connected and they show up simultaneously in situations, and so we can see where we get to choose if we want the light side or the shadow side and which side we want to lead with. And so that leads us into the different stages of the sage's journey. And so we have and I'm just going to say all the stages and then have you elaborate on them a little bit from there, Peter. We start with the naive sage, and this is where we're seeking truth through books and outside of ourselves through teachers and dogmatic laws. Then the maturing stage, which learns humility, recognizing multiple perspectives. Then we have the wise sage, embracing paradox, resting in awareness of itself. And then that shadow sage, which is detached, can be detached, arrogant, and stuck in the ivory tower thinking. So, do you want to go through the three like positive light sides of the state sage, and then we'll highlight some of the shadow aspects?
Absolutely. The sage always starts by being honest. A situation arises, complexity, a quandary, confusion, and the sage says, "Hey, I need to understand this." And so the sage starts to search. Now we have ChatGPT, we have in the internet, or a person could go and get a book to learn about in that specific area, to find the truth about that specific area. It could be trying to find out the truth about, a specific topic, science or psychology, or neurology or anatomy, theosophy or theology, spirituality. But the individual starts out by an instigation to search for a specific truth, and that comes with a sincere heart and an honest demeanor or posture personality. And after the individual has, gathered all of this knowledge, studied, read, learned, you start to coalesce or coagulate or combine different understandings to make sense or meaning of what you've read. And one of the things that happens in that stage of, combining, coalescing knowledge together is that there's a high level of humility that comes into the sage, recognizing that there's always more to learn. After the sage has read or studied as such, you recognize the vastness of knowledge. You recognize that there's multiple dimensions of information and it's almost infinite. It's actually infinite and unlimited, the amount of knowledge out there in the universe. And that gives the sage a sense of humility that there's always more to know, that I haven't got it all, that there's still more out there to know, to learn. And also, the sage recognizes the fact that there are individuals that have their own dimension of perspective because of the nature of their reality. The next thing that happens to the sage, really, in searching for the truth, especially when the sage is searching for the truth about oneself, is that it begins to gain this awareness that reality is a construct of the mind, meaning that we have created reality by the things that we have dropped into our mind, and therefore there is a separate self that is observing the mind. The mind is not the self. The mind is just a tool of the self. Personality is a tool of the self. There is something behind of that. And that is the wise sage that can step back because it recognizes that everything in its reality is a projection, is a creation of its own mind. Everything it has attracted to itself, it has created that to itself. It can be separated from that because it is just the thing that is observing. Like in the theater example, the sage recognizes itself not as the character on the screen, not even as the audience, but as the director in the background, and that can actually shift the nature of the story. That's the ultimate level of the sage. And if we can jump into talking about the shadow side of the sage, as the sage goes through his journey, I believe, when it's still starting out on the naive side, the shadow aspect of the sage sometimes will show up as the sage being, what we can call spiritual bypass, overly, the ivory tower thinking, overly out there, and the spiritual are not fully integrated into the material dimension. Also, a shadow sage is a sage that believes that they know it all, and that brings, arrogance when they haven't recognized that it's not possible for an individual live stream or so to have all of the knowledge because there's so much knowledge out there, so many multiple dimensions, and each dimension there's an expert in that dimension or that attribute or that nature of God. So a single live stream doesn't contain all of the infinite knowledge. It's like going to the ocean and consciousness is like a container, and we just take a container of the ocean, but the ocean is so vast. A sage recognizes that I'm just a container within that ocean, and the ocean itself is infinite, is vast. And so an arrogant or shadow sage is one that hasn't recognized the truth nature of reality as being this infinite, vast ocean. And of course, the other aspect of the sage is as opposed to having um, dissociation, or disidentification from reality, the sage might be detached from reality, meaning that it's living in a form of denial of, truth. And again, the big thing about the sage is recognizing truth. And so when the sage is detached from truth, it's not a true sage. It's actually a shadow sage because that detachment from the nature of reality as this is truly happening. It's not that it's not happening. It's not that the physical world is not happening and it's somewhere else creates again a shadow sage. But and the sage is always progressing, always growing. So this shadow stage is a stage where, as the sage awakens, it begins to bring its awareness to its shadow aspect, dissolves that, and becomes the wise sage eventually.
Beautiful. Thank you for highlighting both aspects. And it can be easy when we are unconscious to slip into those shadow aspects. And sometimes shadow aspects can protect us in some ways. And so it's fun to be able to have more cognition of why we're choosing to do what we're doing instead of having our unconscious lead us. So thank you for all of that. And one thing that I'd like to invite the audience to do is to like and subscribe. And if you have other topics that you'd like to learn about in the esoteric realm, we would love to dive deeper into them with you. So definitely write those in the comments below. And so I'm going to ask a couple of questions. One is to just think about your life and think of a time that you've looked outside of yourself for answers rather than inside of yourself. An example of myself in the past, I've been like a junkie for taking programs, a program junkie, and a lot of my colleagues are that same way. We're like, oh, let's take this person's program and this person's program. Then you all of a sudden are taking 5 programs. instead of realizing that maybe one program is enough and that's going to guide you to the answers that are inside of you. And then the next part, I'm just going to invite us all to close our eyes. And like Peter said, imagine that you're at the movie and just allow yourself to be looking at that screen of the movie. And just allow yourself to put your life on the movie and screen and separate yourself so you are the observer, the watcher, and you are a part of the movie. Just watch yourself going throughout your day. Let's bring up an experience with, let's say, a partner or kids, one of your children, and just watch how you experience that interaction together. And then we're going to replay that experience. And this time, realizing that you're not your thoughts, you're not that body, you are pure consciousness watching this. You can separate yourself. And from this space, knowing that we can separate ourselves, just remembering that we can take this into our day-to-day lives. The next time that you have an experience with a family member or a colleague that is maybe not so pleasurable, separate yourself from those emotions and those feelings and see that you can make a different choice. And when we do this, we can either choose the orphan, like we were talking about before, be that victim, or we can choose the magician and we can transform the energy. So now we get to have the choice rather than letting the unconscious rule our lives. So I invite you to just take another deep breath, breathing in through our nose, into our hearts. Feel that loving energy extend out to your fingers and your toes. And breathe out through your mouth. Wiggle your fingers and your toes. And blink your eyes, coming back to this present moment. And we invite you to check out our website, www.root-awakening.com, where we have a beautiful program under the School of Mythosynthesis called Archetypal Awakening. And it's where we can start to delve into more of these archetypes that we play together and start to see if you want to keep your roles or if you want to shift them. And Peter, is there anything more that you'd like to say before we head out for this day, either about the sage itself or about our archetypal awakening workshop?
It's always nice, talking about learning about the archetypes and mastering them. It enables us, again, to your point, Katie, to live awakened and to awaken our planet. We're here to support raising evolution and raising the level of consciousness on our planet. So the more of us, take courses like we are offering and take our awakening journey seriously, it's in our hands. No one can grow for us. The more our planet becomes a place of bliss, a place of, unity, a place of abundance, because we all become empowered to create as we are co-creating with the divine. So we invite you again, as Katie said, to jump on our courses and watch our videos, share, like, subscribe, so more of us on the planet can be awakened and we can elevate consciousness on the planet and have abundance for all, peace, freedom, healing, and everything that we need to live a life of harmony on planet Earth.
Thank you so much, Peter. And to our audience, we do invite you tonight, as you rest, simply notice yourself noticing and see how the sage begins to awaken within you. We look forward to continuing to grow together. Much love, YouTube family.